He wasn't supposed to be there. Not yet. Not this soon. The timeline that the Dodgers medical staff had constructed with the careful precision of people who understood exactly what was at stake said 1 month. It said rest. It said controlled environment. It said the stadium could wait because the stadium would always be there and the body that made the stadium matter was the thing that needed protecting right now. But Shohei Ohtani had other ideas. When the black vehicle pulled into the players' entrance at Dodger Stadium on a morning that nobody had publicly announced, when the security personnel who had been briefed but had told nobody outside the immediate circle waved it through without stopping, when the door opened and Ohtani stepped out into the familiar smell of cut grass and stadium concrete, the reaction from the people who saw him was not the reaction of people who had been expecting him. It was the reaction of people who couldn't believe what they were seeing. And then, almost immediately, it became something else entirely. Something warmer. Something that had nothing to do with baseball and everything to do with what a team actually is when the cameras are not running and the press conferences are not scheduled and the only people in the room are the people who show up every day together. The All-Star break had just ended. The players were returning in that particular mood of men who have had slightly too many days away from their routine and are quietly relieved to have something structured to return to. Bags were being dropped in the clubhouse. Coffee was being made. The low-level noise of a team reassembling itself after a pause filled the corridors in the way it always does, familiar and unremarkable. And then someone saw him. The word moved through the building the way important words move in closed environments. Not announced. Not broadcasted. Passed from person to person in the specific register of information that feels too significant for a normal speaking voice. One person told another person who told another person, and within 4 minutes the corridor outside the clubhouse had more people in it than corridors normally have at that hour of the morning. Dave Roberts was among the first to reach him. What happened next was not the formal, professionally appropriate exchange of a manager greeting a player returning from injury. It was shorter than that and more direct and considerably more human. Roberts, who has managed in this league long enough to have developed the particular emotional efficiency of someone who does not waste feeling on small things but does not withhold it from large things, looked at Ohtani for a moment without saying anything. Then he put both hands on his shoulders. He said something that the people standing close enough to hear have declined to repeat publicly. But the expression on Roberts' face when he said it was the expression of a man telling another man something true. The GM arrived 3 minutes later. He was carrying something. Not holding it casually, the way you carry something incidental. Holding it with the deliberateness of someone who has thought about this moment and decided that the object in his hands was the right thing for it. A gift, wrapped simply, without the elaborate packaging of something chosen by a PR department. The kind of wrapping that communicates personal selection rather than organizational gesture. He handed it to Ohtani. Ohtani looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at the GM. Then he looked back at it. The people in the corridor watched him process the gesture with the particular attentiveness of a team that has been carrying the weight of his absence and is now, in this small ceremony of a wrapped package being transferred between two people, beginning to set that weight down. He opened it slowly. Not performing slowness. Actually slow. The slowness of someone who is aware that the moment deserves more than efficiency. What was inside has not been confirmed by any official source. But the people who were standing in that corridor, the ones who saw his face when the wrapping came away, have described his expression in consistent terms. Surprise first. Then something that took longer to arrive and was harder to name. The expression of someone receiving something that communicated not just thought but understanding. Not just generosity but recognition. He said thank you in a way that, according to the people who were there, did not sound like the thank you of someone completing a social obligation. It sounded like he meant it in a way that went beyond the object. The teammates came in waves after that. The ones who had been at the All-Star game carried the specific energy of people returning from a trip they'd taken without a friend who should have been there. There is a particular quality to that energy. A mixture of the good feeling of having been somewhere significant and the slightly hollow awareness that the experience was incomplete. They had represented the team, and the league, and themselves well. But Ohtani's absence had been a presence of its own throughout the break, a named thing that kept appearing in the interviews and the panel discussions and the casual conversations in hotel corridors. Now he was here. And the return of the all-star contingent became, almost immediately, a different kind of reunion than the one they had anticipated. Mookie Betts reached him and said something that made Ohtani laugh. A real laugh, not the polite social version. The kind that moves the whole face and takes a moment to subside. Betts watched it happen and looked quietly satisfied, the way you look when you have successfully done the specific thing you set out to do. Others followed. Each interaction brief. Each one carrying its own texture. The veterans with the ease of men who have navigated these moments before. The younger players with a slightly more visible relief, the relief of people for whom Ohtani's presence in the building is not just good for the team but genuinely stabilizing in a way they might not have words for yet. And then Freddie Freeman found him. Freeman's relationship with Ohtani occupies a specific register within the Dodgers clubhouse dynamic. He is not simply a teammate. He is the other gravitational center of this roster, the player whose emotional steadiness and professional example set a tone that the rest of the clubhouse reads and responds to without anyone ever making it explicit. When Freeman speaks in the clubhouse, people listen. Not because they have been told to. Because he has earned it in the specific currency of showing up and performing and caring about the right things for long enough that his voice carries weight without needing volume. Freeman looked at Ohtani when he reached him. He looked at the bandaging. He looked at the careful way Ohtani was holding his arm. He looked at the brightness in Ohtani's eyes that suggested, to anyone who knew him, that being back in this building had already done something for him that the hospital and the rest and the careful management could not quite replicate. And Freeman said something that nobody had said to Ohtani yet that morning. He scolded him. Not harshly. Not with anger. With the particular firmness of someone who cares enough to say the thing that is uncomfortable because the comfortable thing would be insufficient. He said, and this was confirmed by two people who were standing close enough to hear, that being here was not the same as being ready. That the building would still be here tomorrow. That showing up early was not always the same as doing the right thing, and that Ohtani of all people should understand the difference between those two things by now. Ohtani listened to all of it. He did not argue. He did not deflect. He did not produce the polite, slightly distancing smile that public figures use when they are receiving criticism they have decided not to engage with. He listened with the full attention of someone who has decided that the person speaking deserves that attention and that the words being spoken deserve to be actually heard. Then he nodded once. Freeman looked at him for another moment. Then something shifted in his expression. The firmness did not disappear. But something warmer moved underneath it. He put his hand briefly on the back of Ohtani's neck, the way you do with someone you are not just professionally attached to, and then he walked away. The people who witnessed it did not speak immediately afterward. The two requests came later. After the gift, after the teammates, after Freeman's quiet scolding had settled into the atmosphere of the morning like something that had needed to be said and had now been said and could be moved past. Ohtani asked for two things. And both of them surprised the people he asked. The first request was for access to the film room. Not to watch game footage. To watch his own pitching mechanics from before the injury. Specifically, the bullpen sessions from early in the season, before the workload had begun to accumulate in the way the 15-page medical document had described. He wanted to watch himself when his body was doing what he asked it to do without complication. He said, through his interpreter, that he needed to remember what that felt like from the outside so that when he returned to the mound he would know the difference between the real version and the compensated version. The medical staff heard that request and exchanged a look among themselves. It was not the look of people who had expected it. It was the look of people who had just received information about how this particular athlete processes recovery that they had not previously had. They said yes. The second request was simpler and in some ways more revealing. He asked if Mamiko could have access to the stadium during his rehabilitation sessions. Not to watch. Not to be involved in the medical process. Simply to be present in the building. In a room nearby. Available. Roberts, when this was relayed to him, did not deliberate. He said of course. He said it the way you say something when the answer was never actually in question, when the deliberation would have been a performance of consideration rather than genuine consideration, when the right answer is clear enough that arriving at it quickly is not carelessness but honesty. Ohtani left the stadium 3 hours after he arrived. The same black vehicle. The same careful movement getting into the seat. The bandaging unchanged. The timeline unchanged. The 1 month still a 1 month. But something in the building was different from what it had been that morning. Not dramatically different. Not in a way that would appear in any box score or injury report or organizational communication. The kind of different that a team feels when the person at the center of what they are trying to do has walked back through the door. Even briefly. Even carefully. Even wearing clothes chosen in under 10 seconds and moving with the deliberateness of someone whose body is still in the process of remembering how to be itself. He had been there. For the Dodgers, on a Tuesday morning at the end of the All-Star break, that was enough.